It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. I wasn't planned this way, but this is an episode of terrible, awful, shitty things. And of course, this is on the back from the previous episode of How to Plan Your Funeral. I did not intend it to be this way, so please forgive me and indulge me, but it's important stuff. And the interview this week with Brandon Wolf was someone I met at the Free Flow conference in Orlando a couple of weeks ago. So these were the first two people to respond and volunteer and be able to schedule a time where we could talk. So I've been wanting to have Brandon on for a while. Brandon Wolf is an advocate for LGBTQ plus rights and liberties and freedoms, which just should be human rights and liberties. I mean, can't we just all get along? But he became noticed on the national scene through a tragic accident, through the Pulse nightclub shooting, which was in the Orlando city, in Orlando here near me, 7 years ago. I wasn't in this area then, but it's a big deal. The killer went in with amazing, powerful guns. I think 49 people were killed and something like 53 were injured, some severely, and have permanent disabilities and disadvantages for the rest of their life. And I don't want to spoil too much of his story, but he was in the building and he and some friends were in the bathroom and they left the bathroom and were shot and killed. He stayed behind for another few seconds and lived. And if that won't fuck you up, I don't know what will. So it's very powerful stuff. I know you're going to enjoy it. That's why we have it. But this whole process of guns in America, I'm sick and tired of it. I don't know about you. It seems so simple and straightforward. We need to do something. But we'll talk to Brandon about those important issues. I have a segment that is updated from one of my clients' experiences. And I, of course, can't tell you who they are. And they listen to the show, so they'll know who they are. And again, like I say with everything, when I talk about a specific individual's investment choices or options or results, it is not a personal attack on you. This system, in a large part, is designed to trick you. But they had what I've talked about many, many times, a private placement REIT. And they had three of them when they came to me. One we got out of pretty quickly, and I was very happy about that. A second one, we had bigger losses, and it took a couple of years to get out. And this one now, I think after they've owned it 7 or 8 years, they have gotten an offer from a third party, and they're taking it because they're just sick and tired of seeing this go down every time they get a statement. And their loss on this is about 85%. And so not only is it a loss of 85%, but the market has cranked. I mean, 22 aside, as a big down year, if you had invested $100,000 8 years ago, it could be worth $200,000, $250,000, where in this case, the $100,000 became $15,000. So it wasn't just the loss, it was the lost opportunity to make an awful lot of money. And this stuff, if you were asking me, it should be illegal. It is set up in such a way that I could say that you can't win. You're not gonna. Often these companies will set up a real estate fund and they actually make money for a few years and then they're able to promote that and launch clone funds, but then something somehow is different or something doesn't go their way. And then, of course, on top of this, in this case, real estate, commercial real estate has gone a little soft, but I think this is at best profoundly grotesque mismanagement. But I think more likely the whole thing was set up in a perfectly legal way, to the best of my knowledge, to separate you from your money through fees and expenses and all kinds of fun things that we've talked about before. But we're going to go over that specific scenario and how that worked out. So some bummer stuff. A super shitty fund. I don't think I mentioned this already. LSOFS. And we're going to talk about this long short fund and its claims of recent success, which are true, but its abysmal historic track record. So all of this and more can be yours if the price is right. Wait, what?
My name is Annie Drian, and I'm founder of Cosmos Studios and very honored to have been the longtime collaborator of Carl Sagan. And I'd like to say that I think it's just the opposite of what you're saying from my perspective, humbly. One is that I think that science tolerates the unknown in a way that religion doesn't. My argument is not with people who search for God. My argument is with people who feel that our understanding of God is completed. And those are the people who make so much of our existence on this planet such a hell, because they really think that they have the right to kill other people, to hurt them, because of what they understand God's will to be. That's a very destructive thing. So science is, the whole methodology of science is saying that we are not permitted these absolute truths that religion pretends to have, that we do not know the answer to these questions, and not only that, but the little that we think we do know, if you can prove us wrong, we'll give you our highest reward. And that's part of the methodology. That's part of the whole functioning of the system itself. So yes, in answer to what Joan was saying earlier, scientists do terrible things. Scientists have biases. Religious people do terrible things, and they have biases. But absolutely intrinsic to the whole the methodology of science is that error-correcting mechanism, which says we must never lose sight of that. That's not in religion. That's not present at all. Talk about humble. It's the fact that we do science and that we can bring ourselves to see that little tiny earth in Carolyn's presentation. That is humility. What science has done for us spiritually is that it has been the only thing that I know of that has compelled us to wean ourselves of our infantile need for centrality. And that was present, that is very much the essence of so many religious formulations of where we come from, why we came to be. It's the sign of mental health, that we can bear to think that this planet was perfectly fine for 4.5 billion years without us. That cosmic evolution goes on for 13.5 billion years before we even get here. How long have we been in science? How long have we systematically been looking at nature? Not even 400 years. And yet science gets us out to Enceladus. It takes us out of the solar system. It enables us to wean ourselves of that spiritual narcissism which compelled us to be at the center of everything. So when it comes to humility, when it comes to a tolerance for ambiguity and for the unknown, I think science worships the unknown. I think scientists are most comfortable in that place of not knowing. And that's where they live. And that's the great strength of science. So I would respectfully disagree.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions.
I really don't want to do this segment on private placement REITs, but I don't know how I can not do this segment. Not only is it about private placement REITs, but you can apply this to a lot of things that you see fancy websites on. Masterworks comes to mind, where you get to invest in art, allegedly. But private placement REITs. I am not talking about an individual share of a REIT that you could buy with a broker. Although you probably shouldn't be doing that either, but for different reasons, and nowhere near as bad as I think this is. And you can get a mutual fund or an index fund from all the big companies that do REITs. And they're going to use that money and either buy stock in companies that are in real estate, or they are going to buy actual real estate, depending on the rules set up for that index fund. But what I'm going to talk about now specifically, and I'm going to give you the name of it, you can go Google it. It's very interesting. North Star Healthcare Income Fund. And it had all the promises. I've been looking at this for many, many years now, following this tragic story along. The idea, of course, was, hey, we have an aging population, and they're going to need more healthcare and nursing homes and senior living. So we're going to invest in all the real estate that's going to be developed and necessary for all of the Americans that are getting older and older all across the country, and build these properties and run these properties. And, it's $10 a share. And so I'm talking about an actual result for a client of mine. And they know who they are. They'll probably listen to this. And it has nothing to do with you. You did not do anything wrong. I'm not picking on you. I am sharing your story in a way that no one can figure out who you are, but as a warning to anyone else that's out there that might consider investing something like this. So this person invested about $80,000 in this REIT, this private placement REIT, which means it's not publicly traded. They did this before they hired me, so I had nothing to do with it. Matter of fact, they had 3 different REITs that their previous advisor sold, and we were able to get out of one of them at pretty close to the amount of money that was put in. I'm very excited about that success story. And the second one had a pretty moderate loss, but still kind of painful, and it took a while. But this one, which it started at $10 a share, so they had something like 8,000 shares, $80,000 invested. And the private placement REIT, because there's no publicly trading of the shares, you are, I guess, dependent on the REIT company, the organizer of this specific REIT, for them to tell you approximately what each share is worth going forward. I don't like that. I don't like that a lot. Even if there weren't other problems with this, that would be bad enough for me to go, thank you, no. It is bad enough to invest in any privately held company because you are always subject, even in publicly traded companies, if you want to get out, you're subject to what you can get, what the market will bear. If you have stock in a publicly traded corporation and the economy is going bad and the market's down 50%, you're going to have a hard time getting a good price for that stock, even if the company is perfectly sound. Well, you have all those risks here, plus the unknowable things of you have absolutely no way to know what the company is worth on the inside, from the inside. And because it's not publicly traded, you can't call up your average broker and say, hey, I want to sell this. What's the going price for it? It doesn't work that way. You have to find someone that will buy it. Well, in this case, let me stick to the things that I know as facts. North Star Healthcare originally launched at $10.20 a share. I'm going to refer to it as $10. I'm rounding for the purpose of this discussion. And this person bought 8,000 shares, 80,000 approximate dollars put into it. And it rocks along, and every report at the end of each quarter, they come out and they say, yep, still worth $10 a share, everything's fine. Yep, still worth $10 a share, everything's fine. And possible motivation for this, I don't know. I'm not inside their head, but the possible motivation is that they're still selling more shares. More people are investing. So you just keep bringing in the money, bringing in the money, bringing in the money. After they decide to stop bringing in money, or the result of what they did next, which stopped the bringing in of money, one day, a couple of years ago, several years after 2016, I'm thinking it was in 2019. You can Google it. Correct me if I got it wrong, but it doesn't really change the material story. One day, all of a sudden, they said, no, it's worth $7 a share. And you think to yourself, well, how can they do that? Because they can. One of the things these things will always tell you is that your shares are liquid and you can get them out whenever you want. However, that whenever you want is only at the end of a calendar quarter, and the redemptions are limited to something like 2% or 3% of all of the assets and of all the dollars. Now, to be fair, if I'm investing in real estate, I don't want everyone yanking out their money when I'm in the middle of buying property because it takes a long time to sell everything and wind down. Another thing usually is that REITs like this are set up for a 10-year lifespan. And at 10 years, everyone gets their money back. And for a couple of years, this thing was paying out dividends. Unfortunately, it was set up in such a way that the dividends were reinvested. So this person ended up with over 10,000 shares, and the share price keeps falling. So even the quote unquote, wink, wink, nudge, nudge dividends that they paid out were in additional shares. So now we have 10,000 shares, and the last reported price, let me go over to this other screen here, reported by, where is that? Oh, here it is. By the REIT itself, is that shares are now worth $2.93 a piece. How did they come up with $2.93 per share? Fuck if I know. I got no idea. I don't even know how one would find out. If you know how one would find out, let me know. I'd be curious and I'd be happy to share it on the show. But because there's no public trading, they're saying it's worth $2.93. So their initial approximate $80,000 investment now shows that it's worth $29,000 something, under 30. And that's that. There have been lawsuits launched against North Star Healthcare. And the curious thing, you have to ask yourself, like anyone would, did they just do that bad of a job? And again, I don't know. Did they just amble about and not understand real estate and lost all this money? Or was there a system in place that created an ongoing drain of the money that went to other companies that are associated or not associated with North Star Healthcare, and the money just went away? Because I'm thinking since 2016, and maybe real estate has gotten a little soft in the last couple of years, COVID and all, but it's not down that much. But, you know, here we are. Well, recently, this person has gotten an offer from a theoretically unaffiliated third party that says, hey, we are interested in buying these shares from people. We'd like to buy your shares. And their offer is $12,000 for total, for everything. So $12,000. You put in $80,000. It theoretically is worth $30,000, and now you get an offer for $12,000. So what are you supposed to do? I don't have an easy answer for this. In this case, the person that had these is kind of taking the position, I can't deal with this anymore. This is more emotionally draining than financially draining at this point. I just want anything that I can get out of this and walk away and do something else. And of course, it's not just that by taking this offer, they're going to lose about 85% of what they put in. It also means that since 2016, so for the last 6, maybe 7 years, when the market went up, 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 they didn't get to enjoy that at all. So instead of having 2 to 3 times the money they put in, they have 15% of the money they put in. Is anyone going to go to jail? I doubt it. I can't imagine it, even with the lawsuits. And of course, if you hire an attorney, pardon me, or you join one of the class action kind of lawsuits against this, what's the final settlement going to be? And what's the part that the attorney takes? Because if these shares aren't really worth more than 30 or 12, maybe they're worth 20, maybe they're worth 22. I don't know. Again, you don't have a way to do that calculation, but you could win in court. And because of the cut the attorneys take, end up with the same or maybe even less money. And you had to follow it and sweat it and worry about it for the next couple of years. Also, because this thing was launched, I think, in 2016, you can't get your money out until 2026. Well, maybe you can get some out. And then, of course, maybe there's delays, because there's always clauses in these contracts, because I've dealt with other REITs over the last 27 years I've been doing this, however long it is, where they give out they pay back some of the money, and then there's a delay, and there's properties that they haven't been able to liquidate or sell or whatever. So it takes years and years and years after that, where there was no even implied that you were going to make money past the 10 years. So if it takes them 3, 4, 5 more years to pay you out, at least pay you out what they're going to pay you out, again, that money is just getting smaller. You're not making money on it, and it's just anxiety and pain. So here's a case where someone bought a private placement REIT. All of the dividends sadly went into additional shares, and they are now looking at getting 15% of their money back. Oh, I forgot to tell you, they have a clause in it that says you can withdraw money at any time. And then most of these things will say something like once every calendar quarter. And that's where I got derailed on the value of real estate. And then each calendar quarter might be capped at something like 2 or 3%. And then even then, there is a process that you have to go through, forms, verifications, and all this stuff. It's harder than buying a Taylor Swift ticket. It can be very difficult. And in this case, they decided after a few years of operation, you know what? We're not even going to do that anymore. So apparently there must be something in the contract that allows them to decide unilaterally that no one can redeem any money anymore. And poof, now you're really stuck until you find someone who wants to buy it. Well, who wants to buy it? Nobody. And then along comes somebody that does want to buy it. Do you take the money or do you not take the money? It's a lose-lose scenario, I think. I mean, it's almost like you lit the money on fire and you're able to save 15% of it, save the 15% and move on. But these kinds of things shouldn't be legal. People that do this, I don't know if they haven't done anything illegal, do they go to jail? I don't know, but I'm rambling now. My apologies. It's just so very frustrating for me to see. And it's not even my money. It's one of my clients. And I don't know any better way out. I can't undo it. So when you're talking to anybody, you got to make sure that you know what you're getting in, because a lot of this stuff can make a good story on an internet page. But do you really understand what you're buying? Did you really read the contract? Do you really know what you're doing? And if the answer is no, then don't do it. I mean, you could educate yourself and then decide that's what you want to do. But just because someone tells you to buy this alternative investment that's good for you, I mean, I don't know what the claims were back in 2016, but this is supposed to probably pay 8 to 10% per year. It didn't. Well, I mean, it did pay some dividends, but even the dividends are worth so little that you still have an 85% loss with the dividends. Anyway, I'm so frustrated about this whole thing. Just wanted to share that with you. Private placement REITs, any other investment that you see online, until you fully understand exactly what you're getting into, don't. All right, that's enough ramble. I'm going to wrap that up and we'll go on with the rest of the show.
Jesus had a tough life, boy. I read about that guy. Jesus is the only guy that ever came back from the dead that didn't scare the fuck out of everybody, man. He's the only guy that ever crawled out of a grave where people didn't go, oh, ah! Oh, I just saw some fucker crawl out of his grave! Jesus comes back, he doesn't get any pressure, no static, nobody's upset. He climbs out, he's walking around, nobody's upset. They can eat with him and everything, you know? It's like, isn't that guy dead? Yeah, but he's real stubborn, man. He won't accept it. Pass the butter. What are they staring at? Yeah, I read it, folks. I read that book. He's on the cross. 30, 40 Christians standing around going, it's a shame that he has to die. And Jesus is going, well, maybe I wouldn't have to. Somebody get a ladder and a pair of pliers. I don't know if Jesus has actually spoken in an audible voice to anybody in about 2,000 years, folks. I think his last words may have been, oh, not the other one, oh, you jerk, no. It may have been his last words, I'm not sure. Yeah, people say, you think Jesus is coming back? Sure. What's it been, 2,000 years? Boy, I sure don't want to dampen anybody's optimism here. It's only 2,000 fucking years. Yeah, he's coming back. He's going to do game shows. We're going to go, Jesus, this is your life. Remember this noise? Yeah. All right, don't tell me. Give me a second. He's up in heaven right now. They're going, why don't you go back down to earth? Be a symbol of peace and love to the world. Help. And he's going, yeah, sure. Help, huh? Yeah, I'd like to help. Tell him I'll be there as soon as I can play the piano again. Thanks a lot. I mean, the only savior that can use his hand is a fucking whistle.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions.
Ladies and gentlemen, here it is, a new super shitty fund. Yay! I'm just delighted how many people like this little segment we do from time to time. Haven't done it for a while, but I had one just plop into my lap. It is the LS Opportunity Fund Institutional Class. You can look it up yourself at your leisure on Morningstar.com. All free information available on the internets. The symbol is LSOFX. So we're going to talk about that here. But the first part, of course, is I got an email. And they want me to sell this to you, right? So that's kind of cool. And what is it? It is a long-short fund. What is a long-short fund? I'm not 100% sure, but I think the name gives us a pretty good place to start. It's long some stocks. It's short some stocks. Cool. This is U.S. market focused. And it says it's in all market cap sizes, large, medium, and small, but mostly large and or large mid, so the bigger size of the mid cap. It also says that it's value driven, not growth driven, which doesn't pan out again on the data in Morningstar. You can go to portfolio after you pull up the fund, and it will show you a little matrix, Morningstar's famous matrix. It looks like a tic-tac-toe grid, and you can see what percentage is in each category, large, medium, and small. And Morningstar breaks up between value, blend, and growth. So it, like I said, it looks like hashtag, number, pound sign, tic-tac-toe board, whatever works for you. It only has a 17% bias towards value versus growth. So it's pretty much just down the middle. And I think it's reasonable to compare this to the S&P 500. So, and it's funny because then they did. So they are very excited because they outperformed the S&P 500 by 15% in 2022. Of course, so did the large cap value fund. But you know what? Hey, I'll give them credit where credit is due. maybe, but they outperformed by 14.95 or 15%. And one of the things you can do at Morningstar is look up how much of the fund is in cash. And right now, the part that's in cash is 36%. Well, if you had a third of your money all last year in cash, that is going to help you avoid stock losses. So maybe that had something to do with it. Other things here, they have, there's a bunch of bullet points. Fundamental long-short strategy. Great. Okay. Strategy has a 25-year track record. Cool. It used to be run by an organization that was a hedge fund that got bought, and then it was turned into a index or a mutual fund. And that mutual fund has only been running since 2010. So the other data is obscured to us because it wasn't part of the mutual fund. Let's see what else they have here. Value bias, fair enough. Truly long and short individual names. Cool. They're buying and shorting stocks. Okay. Up to 80% of portfolio names are recycled. I guess they're buying and selling. No leverage on long side, which is interesting. Are they leveraging the short side then? Why not have no leverage? Offers transparency and daily liquidity. Well, daily liquidity because it's a mutual fund, and all mutual funds have daily liquidity. 4-star Morningstar rating, which we've talked about before. Maybe I can do another segment on that. It's been a while. Completely and utterly meaningless. A beautiful thing. So I'll talk positive about the Morningstar site and how useful it can be to you, but the star rating thing, complete and utter bullshit. Useless. Absolutely useless. Consistent net exposure level, 50 to 80%. Okay. And then principals have their own money invested. Doesn't say how much or what percentage. It could be 0.5%. I don't know. They don't tell us. So let's look at some of the basics, things that we've talked about recently of how to review a mutual fund to kind of get an idea for how good it might do. And again, remember, the first thing we're going to look at here is expense ratio. A index fund might be 0.1% or 10 basis points. And this fund has an expense ratio of 2.89%. So you are going to pay 3% of your money every year for the privilege of them doing their thing. How well do they do? I'm going to get that in a minute. Another thing, of course, here, the turnover is 55%. Honestly, I would have expected more than 100% based on the description, but more than half of the things that they bought and or shorted, they're changing those positions, 55% of them in one calendar year, which means a lot of your gains, if you have them, foreshadowing, if you have them, are going to be short-term gains, and you're not going to be able to take advantage of long-term gains tax rates, which are considerably lower. So that could hurt you quite a bit. Let's see, what else do we normally look at? Performance. Let's look at the performance numbers, and I am going to compare this to the S&P 500 because they do. So, right, fair is fair. And they pointed out that they beat the S&P 500 by about 15% in 2022. And let's see here. I'm looking at the numbers. Yeah, that's, within a fraction of a percent. That is correct. So they did outperform the S&P 500 in 2022. So they're going on this big push to promote this thing. What did they do in other years? Let's look at 2021, the previous year. The S&P 500 was up 28.66%, and his fund was up 12. So underperforming by 16%. They didn't mention that in the email. I'm sure they did better in 2020. They were up 4.35, and the S&P 500 was up 18.37. So they underperformed by 14%. Okay, well, maybe 19. they did make almost 17%, but the market was up 31.5%. So short 13, 14%. 2018, the S&P 500 was down 4.4. They were down 3.5. So they beat the market by 1 percentage point. 2017, the market was up 22. They were up 10. 2016, the market was up 12. They were up 12.7. So they did outperform there. And in 2015, this fund that is supposed to protect you from the downside market, when the S&P 500 made only 1.36, they lost 4. So they were underperforming by 5%. 2014, the market made almost 14% and they lost half. Now, 2013 was a fantastic year. The market was up 32.33, and this fund was 25. So they were short 7%. That's not good. And we'll look at the composite here. 10-year performance, just for laughs. Let's just cut to the chase. 10-year performance. The index, the S&P 500 index made 11.88, almost 12. And this made about 5.85, about 6. So on average, this mutual fund underperforms the S&P 500 by 6% per year. So during a time when the market has returned higher than average returns, 12%, this has made 6. So that's pretty devastating. But how does that work out in terms of dollars? And Morningstar has a cute little graph here for me. If you had invested $10,000 in the S&P 500 as of today, and it is April of 23, your $10,000 in the S&P 500 index would be worth about $35,000. This fund is worth $23,000. So you could have made $13,000 or $25,000 in gains over the last decade from a fund that is all braggadocious about how they beat the S&P 500 last year. Whoop-de-fucking-do. I bet they don't do it next year, and I bet for sure they don't do it over the next 5 or 10 years going forward, in part because this is a failed strategy. We've already talked about it in past shows, the long-short strategy, like most things. It's a scheme that just doesn't work. You top that with a 3% expense ratio, which, by the way, doesn't include the transaction or trading costs, which you will bear. So it's not a surprise that they're 6% under the market per year on average for the last decade. And this is the kind of shit that people email me, and they pick out little pieces of information in a sad and pathetic attempt to induce me to tell you you should buy it. Oh, I didn't look to see, does it have a load? Well, it's the institutional class, so it probably doesn't. And Morningstar doesn't look like there's a load. I don't see one here. I'd have to dig further, but at this point, I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to sell it to you. I'm not going to recommend it to you. Matter of fact, of course, it is a super shitty fund. So that's more than you'd ever want to know about LS Opportunity Fund Institutional Class. The symbol is LSOFX.
Reverend Mesa, Reverend Rock, I'm grateful for your generous invitation to state my views. While the so-called religious issue is necessarily and properly the chief topic here tonight, I want to emphasize from the outset that I believe that we have far more critical issues in the 1960 campaign. The spread of communist influence until it now festers only 90 miles from the coast of Florida. The humiliating treatment of our president and vice president by those who no longer respect our power. The hungry children I saw in West Virginia. The old people who cannot pay their doctor's bills. The families forced to give up their farms. An America with too many slums, with too few schools, and too late to the moon and outer space. These are the real issues which should decide this campaign. And they are not religious issues. For war and hunger and ignorance and despair, no religious barrier. But because I am a Catholic, and no Catholic has ever been elected president, the real issues in this campaign have been obscured, perhaps deliberately, in some quarters less responsible than this. So it is apparently necessary for me to state once again, not what kind of church I believe in, for that should be important only to me, but what kind of America I believe in. I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote, where no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference, and where no man is denied public office merely because his religion differs from the president who might appoint him or the people who might elect him. I believe in an America that is officially neither Catholic, Protestant, nor Jewish, where no public official either requests or accepts instructions on public policy from the Pope, the National Council of Churches, or any other ecclesiastical source, where no religious body seeks to impose its will, directly or indirectly, upon the general populace or the public acts of its officials, and where religious liberty is so indivisible that an act against one church is treated as an act against all. For while this year it may be a Catholic against whom the finger of suspicion is pointed, in other years it has been, and may someday be again, a Jew, or a Quaker, or a Unitarian, or a Baptist. It was Virginia's harassment of Baptist preachers, for example, that led to Jefferson's Statute of Religious Freedom. Today I may be the victim, but tomorrow it may be you, until the whole fabric of our harmonious society is ripped apart at a time of great national peril. Finally, I believe in an America where religious intolerance will someday end, where all men and all churches are treated as equals, where every man has the same right to attend or not to attend the church of his choice, where there is no Catholic vote, no anti-Catholic vote, no block voting of any kind, and where Catholics, Protestants, and Jews, at both the lay and the pastoral levels, will refrain from those attitudes of disdain and division which have so often marred their works in the past, and promote instead the American ideal of brotherhood. That is the kind of America in which I believe.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Welcome back, everybody. As promised, my special guest today is Brandon Wolf. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on.
I just wish, we're going to talk about really important stuff, but my apologies in advance for bringing it up, but, it's kind of necessary, sadly. Brandon, you were at the Pulse nightclub almost 7 years ago, right?
Yeah, correct.
Wow. Has much changed since then, or we still have the same problem?
Well, I think it's sort of a complicated question because Pulse was, in many ways, I think a symptom of things that have been prevalent in society for a long time. Certainly we've made progress on LGBTQ equality. We have, made some progress on gun violence prevention. But we're also experiencing an incredible backlash because of those through threads that still exist in our society. And so, to answer your question, has much changed? Yes and no. There is a lot that has changed about being LGBTQ in America, for better and for the worse. And right now, I think what we're experiencing is incredible backlash from a cadre of people who are afraid of a world that they think might treat them as poorly as they've treated others.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to sum it up, honestly. You and I met a few months ago at a Florida Free Thought Society, Culture, Community, the Central Florida Free Thought, whatever, where you gave a talk. I can't remember the name of the group that I'm in here in Orlando. But you gave a talk, and of course, we met and talked, and I don't know if you remember, but I used to DJ in a gay bar many, many years ago. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if you were born then, because you're young. It was great fun for me, and it was a place, even though I am straight, I felt very welcomed and happy to be there. And I think the title of your future book that's coming out in July of 2023, if you don't mind me plugging that. These places aren't just bars. It's not just a place to go dance or party or whatever. It can often be home. If I'm not overstating the case, I'd love to hear. And then, unfortunately, maybe we should have done this earlier. Why is Pulse Nightclub famous? But pick whatever you want out of that and lead us somewhere.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that you mentioned the book. The book is titled A Place for Us, and I would encourage people, it's available for pre-order now. If Amazon is your jam, that's probably obviously the easiest. If you prefer a local store, it is up on bookshop.org. So I would encourage people to pre-order a copy. But when we're in the process of pitching this book, and my story is a memoir, so my story in general, one of the things that I kept getting asked by publishers was, is this a story about Pulse? And my answer was kind of. The book has 10 chapters, and only one of them is about Pulse itself. And the reason that I structured it that way, and the reason that I say kind of, is because the events that happened at Pulse, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but the events that happened at Pulse in 2016 won't really matter to you. You won't feel the gravity of them if you don't understand why places like Pulse exist in the first place. And, you know, as you said, it's about so much more than just bartenders and alcohol and dancing. These are spaces where, you know, people who have been told they don't belong in society alongside everyone else can seek refuge, can seek safety, can seek belonging and chosen family. You know, these spaces in the LGBTQ community have always been lifelines for us. They've always been places where we can finally exhale and be ourselves. And Pulse was one of those for me. And then, you know, in the summer of 2016, it was violently invaded. A man wielding several firearms, including a Sig Sauer MCX, which is an assault rifle, charged through the front doors just after 2:00 in the morning. He started what ended up being, I think, a 3 to 4 hour standoff with police, and in the process killed 49 people and injured 53 others. And, you know, I'm very, very grateful and lucky to have made it out with my life. Unfortunately, my best friends, my chosen family, were not so lucky. Drew and Juan, my best friends, were among those killed that night. And that, first of all, reshaped everything that I've done. It's the thing that has guided me to the advocacy work that I do now. It took me out of my professional career and moved me in a whole new line of work. But again, you know, as we talk about those spaces and what they mean to us, the violent invasion of Pulse represents so much more about, you know, what it means to be LGBTQ and a person of color in this country. It represents, you know, the kind of threat that people are under every single day just for being themselves. So, yeah, you know, Pulse and places like it mean a lot to our community. They've always meant a lot to our community. And I appreciate you highlighting that it's about so much more than just a place to dance with your friends.
Yeah. And of course I prepped and watched a few videos, including, I think it was you being interviewed that night or shortly thereafter. I can't even hardly imagine And I'm assuming you're also, like you said, you're delighted that you got out, but, and I don't want to plant this seed in your head, but, do you ever get that, why me? Why not? Why didn't I just stay in? Why didn't I do something different? Does that haunt you?
Yeah, I would say less so than, the guilt of surviving. That's something that I wasn't, familiar with before the shooting happened, but survivor's guilt is very real.
Yeah.
And yeah, so more so than I've struggled with, why didn't I just stay in? I've struggled a lot with, why didn't I tell my friends to stay in? Why did I go to the bathroom and they stayed on the dance floor? Those are things that I've grappled with a lot over the last 7 years. Part of the journey of writing the book actually was about articulating how I've learned to forgive myself for surviving. And so there's a whole chapter called Forgiveness, and it talks about, not only forgiving myself, but going back and forgiving people from my childhood, including my parents who hurt me deeply when I was a child, when I was, trying to be myself. So there's a lot in this journey and in this story, but yeah, I've grappled with, questions about why didn't my friends just stay in? Why couldn't we have found a different activity that night and they would still be with us today?
Yeah, fair enough. I don't want to dwell on that too much, but you mentioned childhood, and I'm interpreting that the parents didn't understand and didn't respond in ways that were beneficial for you. What would you have to say to current parents and or the kids? What can we do as humans to do a better job at understanding others?
Well, first of all, lead with love. It really, part of the chapter Forgiveness is about my relationship with my dad, and we struggled a lot when I was a kid. And what I learned over time, and certainly learned in the wake of the shooting at Pulse, was that so much of my dad's reaction to who I am was one of fear, and not fear of me being different from other people, but fear of how the world might treat me. And, obviously there's some societal bias and animus in there as well, but so much of the way he reacted to me was because he was afraid that the world would treat me badly because of who I was. And the only way he knew how to express that deep anxiety was to lash out at me, to try to, essentially bully me into the closet. And so one of the things that we confronted when he visited me about a year after the shooting happened, we went to Pulse together at his request, actually. And he brought flowers, and we had this nice moment where he paid his respects, and we got in the car. And he said, I want to apologize because some of the things that I said to you when you were a kid, they were because I was afraid of how the world might treat you. And I thought maybe, if I just convinced you not to live this life, that I could protect you, that I could stop bad things from happening to you, when in reality, all I did was ensure that when bad things did happen to you, I wasn't the first person you called. If we had led with that level of vulnerability and love in the beginning, it may not have taken us, 25 plus years to get to that place. So the first thing that I would just encourage people to do is lead with love. If you love your child, if you love your family, if you love the people around you, then you're willing to, do anything for them. And that includes expand your own horizons, be courageously curious about things you don't understand so that you can continue to love them more deeply.
Wow. That's a story. You almost got me, man. I'm trying to keep it together, but, yeah, you've been around and gotten to talk on some big shows. And what do you got coming up? Are you going to be anywhere particular? Any conferences, places where people can see you or meet you?
Yeah, we'll see. So I will be. Oh my gosh, what day is today? Today's April 4th.
April 4th.
I'm on a big sprint to a number of events starting next week. I'll be in Nevada. I'll actually be at the Northern Nevada Diversity Summit, I think at UNR. So I'll be there next week, and then the following week I'm headed to New York City to sit on a panel to discuss gun safety, and then I get on a plane and I head to New Mexico, where we're having a panel alongside the Federal Office for Victims of Crime. I'm really excited. One of the things that I do is sit on the advisory board for the nation's oldest advocacy organization for victims of violent crime. And they're launching a new program in coordination with a federal grant that helps to induct youth advocates into that movement. And these are folks who are going to advocate for policy change, are going to advocate for resources, specifically for, victims of sexual crimes, victims of violent crimes, victims of mass tragedies like mine. And so we get to help kick off this incredible new venture where, we inspire young people to go out and do that work for their community. So I'll be in New Mexico for that. I'm headed to Miami Beach after that to speak at a Gill Foundation conference. So I'm sort of all over the place. But if folks want to check out my social media pages, I try to keep people updated at least a few days in advance where I'll be next.
Fair enough. And of course, you have your own webpage where people can go learn a little bit and then click on some links to get to the book. That's Brandon Wolf, all one word, .us. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you. There is a page there for the book where you can pre-order right from the website. And I'm going to try to do a better job of keeping people updated there on my whereabouts, but certainly you can catch clips and things afterward. I try to keep the press page updated as much as possible.
Is there a new community for everyone to go to in Orlando now?
Yeah, so Pulse is not the only space that we shared. Thankfully, we have several other venues that people like to gather at. And some new ones have opened since the tragedy. Something I love, I live in the Milk District, which is sort of a downtown adjacent district.
Did you say
the city of Orlando?
Did you say milk?
Milk, yeah. If you're familiar with T.G. Lee,
I'm not. I'm new to Orlando.
Okay,
if it's an Orlando thing, I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the stuff that comes from cows and that you weren't saying MILF.
No, milk. So the very, I don't know, maybe interesting, uninteresting, depends on who you are, backstory is that T.G. Lee is a very large dairy producer in Florida, and they have a warehouse or a distribution center that's in our section of downtown, and that is why it has become the Milk District. And so basically everything is cow themed in this part of the city. It's actually kind of cute.
It is.
Lots of like cow print things. There's blow up cows anytime there's a farmer's market. It's cute. So anyway, I live in the Milk District, and that's also home to an array of LGBTQ spaces, including there's one particular corner where there are 3 bars connected, and that's sort of become the primary gathering spot in the last couple of years.
Very, very, very nice. So you've got the book coming out. Is it written and you're just in final production stages, or do you still need to write it?
No, the book is written.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started the proposal process in 2020. I signed my deal in January of 2021, and I took the next year to write the book. And then most of last year was dedicated to edits and cover art and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And now we're in the home stretch. I finished recording the audiobook. So if you're an audiobook person, there will be an audiobook version with me as the narrator. And we've just started doing, some very preliminary press work, planning a little book tour, and advanced copies have gone to some early reviewers, including my father, which was an interesting conversation.
Wow. I'm so delighted you're having that conversation with him. I'm very happy for you because I know that not everybody gets that. Straight or gay, honestly, humans are tricky. They got their weaknesses and problems. If I can bring it around to guns because of the continuing, I don't know, tragedies, weekly, daily, in churches, in bars, in schools. What are your thoughts? What can we do? How do we do it? Do we take away all the guns? Do we just limit people to 6 bullets so they can't kill 49 people and injure 53 more in just a couple of minutes? That's just obscene.
It is obscene. And, I got to start with this. The American relationship with firearms is incredibly complicated. That is by design. The gun manufacturers, I read this fascinating book called The Gunning of America, and it talks about how the gun manufacturing industry became what it is today, that essentially, at one point in American history, guns were seen as a tool and not as a fetish. And so, you had just like a rake and a shovel, you also had a gun to protect your property and also hunt for food. And in the wake of modernization, the gun manufacturers needed a way to sell the glut of guns they had. And so they started this marketing campaign. They brought on some people who were from the textile industry, and they began marketing guns to young adolescent boys as a show of your manhood. And that sort of began this complicated process of weaving firearm ownership into a sense of masculinity in America. And so I say that because there is no, forgive the euphemism, silver bullet to ending America's gun violence crisis. There's no one law we could pass tomorrow that would, A, have a chance of passage, and B, be able to fix our problem. But there are things that we can do that are widely popular and actually have a real impact. So I'm a data person. I want to know what works. And the data tells us that states that have passed targeted legislation that focuses on not allowing people to get access to firearms who shouldn't have access to them, people that we know to be an immediate danger to themselves or others, states that have passed those targeted pieces of legislation have seen homicides drop by 25 to 30% as a result. And those laws look like, extreme risk protection orders where a court could be petitioned to temporarily remove someone from their firearms. Those laws look like expanded criminal background checks. Those laws look like closing the boyfriend loophole. There's a whole bunch of really targeted legislation that we could take action on tomorrow that has a demonstrated impact of reducing homicides by 25 to 30% in the years that follow that. So that's where I would start the conversation, is how do we pass legislation that we know, based on the data we have, will have an immediate positive impact on our communities?
Absolutely. Now, I think I heard, because you're in Florida, I think you're still in Florida.
I am, yeah. I live in Orlando.
Yep. We just talked about the Milk District. Of course you are. And I'm in the Orlando area. And did our governor just say anyone can carry any gun anywhere all the time, all at once or something? What did that happen? Am I losing my mind? What's going on?
You are not imagining that yesterday Governor DeSantis signed the permitless carry bill into law in Florida. And essentially what that does is eliminate permitting and training requirements for someone to concealed carry a firearm in Florida. And this is, outrageous, unconscionable, and reckless, to be quite honest, because, number one, I'm a data person, so let's take it back to the data. The data tells us that states that pass these permitless, untrained carry laws see an immediate spike in gun violence crimes as a result. And that's for a number of reasons. First of all, because you have a whole bunch of people, whole bunch of hotheads running around with guns that they don't know how to use. They buy a gun at a gun store, they, shove it in their glove box, they learned how to load it on YouTube, and now they're wandering around the Publix parking lot. Somebody gets angry over a spot that's taken, and all of a sudden, a hostile conversation becomes a deadly shootout in the middle of the parking lot. And the second is that people don't know how to safely store them because you've gone through no training on how to use this firearm. You just decided on a whim one day that you wanted to buy a gun. people are more likely to leave it laying around, not safely stored, and as a result, it's more likely to be stolen. It's more likely to fall into the hands of a child who may use it on themselves or others on accident. And so this just opens up Pandora's box of, increased firearm-related injuries and deaths. And I'll just round that out by saying that comes at a time when firearm-related injuries have become the number one cause of death for American children. So this party of we're just protecting the children from drag queens and books about two mommies is simultaneously signing into law, pieces of legislation that will exacerbate the number one cause of death for American children.
Well, I was playing with ideas and concepts on Facebook a couple days ago, and I wondered aloud, what would Republicans in Florida do if you put a dress on a gun?
Maybe that's the answer.
Would they?
Maybe we need to put lipstick and a dress on an AR-15 and call it a drag gun.
A drag gun. I didn't even come up with that. That's good. A drag gun. I don't know. Just basic common sense. Like I have to show some minimal skills to be able to drive a car for the protection of myself and others around me. I don't know why that's so complicated. I don't know. I mean, I guess I do know. And you've covered some of it. It's because it's now part of the culture. And it's going to take a long time to change. And I fear that the only thing that will lead to the inevitable change, I hope inevitable, is time, because everyone that wants to pile up guns eventually dies of old age. I don't want anyone to die any earlier. Thank you very much. But when a younger generation comes along, they can start to fix things. Do you get that feel, or is this a generational problem that's already there?
Yeah, I hope that's the answer. And I have to believe, based on the work that I've done alongside youth organizers and activists, that they're going to be the ones who finally usher in, a different relationship with gun violence in our country. But I also know that it's not going to happen accidentally. It's not just, time is not going to be the only solution. It has to be time plus action and continued mobilization, because at the very same time that we're hoping the younger generation, once again saves us from our worst instincts, you have the gun lobby and gun manufacturers, which again, their only purpose is to sell more guns. You have them out there essentially peddling more guns, especially to marginalized communities, telling them that at this time where things are more hostile and heated than ever, the only answer to keeping yourself safe is to buy a gun. And so, they're sort of capitalizing on this moment where hate crimes are on the rise, where hate rhetoric is on the rise, and trying to put more guns onto the street. And again, data tells us that doesn't make anybody safer. America has the most heavily armed civilian population on planet Earth. And if that made us safer, then we would have the lowest homicide rate on Earth, and we absolutely do not. So, I think we are up against some forces that are driven by greed and are not going to go away quietly. So while I do hope that this is generational in nature and that we've got a new generation of folks coming in who are going to help us fix it, it's going to take real intentional work to combat the forces of greed that are continuing to peddle this lie that more guns is going to make us safer.
Wow, that's a lot to wrap my head around. I do want to be respectful of your time, so I want to wrap up here. And of course, thank you for being here. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to cover? The book, Pulse, relationships, love, guns, what have we missed, and or how can people reach you?
Yeah, the last thing that I'll just say is that so much of my work has centered LGBTQ civil rights. And this is an incredibly difficult moment to not only be doing that work, but to just be an LGBTQ person in this country. And so, I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment to clue people in on what's happening. I mean, right now in the state of Florida, we are on the precipice of passing a bill that will ban private insurance companies from covering transgender people's medical care. And that includes adults. We are, on the precipice in the state of Florida of passing a bill that would send doctors to prison for providing what the American Medical Association calls life-saving and necessary medical care for transgender young people. And things are in a very dangerous and precarious place, and real people's lives are on the line. I'm thinking about, I have a trans coworker, and she works for an LGBTQ civil rights organization. And there's a very real possibility that by July 1st, her private insurance will no longer cover the medication she's been receiving for over a decade because of legislation that's being passed by, the governor's cronies in Tallahassee. So I would just urge people, please stay engaged on these issues. Please stay courageously curious about, people or communities that you don't understand. And please do not be lulled to sleep by what feels like endless chaos, because people desperately need every single ally we can get in this fight. And that's especially true for LGBTQ people and for trans people specifically.
Well, that is fantastic. Thank you for adding that. How can people reach you to interview you for their podcast or YouTube channel, or have you come talk?
Yeah, please reach out. Again, my website is brandonwolf.us. That's all one word, and there's no E on my last name, just brandonwolf.us. There's a little link on there to contact me, and also the information for the folks who can help set us up if you want to have me come and chat with you. This is just a few brief minutes. I can certainly dive a lot deeper, and I'm looking forward to connecting with everyone. Social media works too. I'm very active on Instagram and Twitter, so you can find me there. Just search Brandon Wolf, and there I'll be.
Excellent. Well, Brandon Wolf, thank you for being on the Phil Ferguson Show.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Pace e lunga vita. Lunga vita e prosperità.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Welcome back, and I am delighted that you are here. This, of course, is The Phil Ferguson Show, and I'm delighted that you are here. The best things you can do to help me out if you like the show, go leave a 5-star review somewhere or tell a friend. Just a couple quick updates from me. Just back from Phoenix, Arizona for the American Atheist Conference. An absolute joy. Fantastic conference. And hello to all the people I met as new friends. And of course, a special hello to all the, I don't want to say old, long-term friends, people that I've known for many, many years. Some clients, some not clients. It's just an absolutely fantastic way for me to meet a lot of people, potentially new clients. But like I said, a lot of people who've been clients for decades in some cases that we get to visit, talk in person, even though they live in a different part of the country. In a few places, a few times other parts of the world. But great fun. Now, I highly recommend the conference. Next year is in Philadelphia, so it should be easy for a generously large portion of the U.S. population. So almost everybody from the Midwest to the Northeast to the Southeast can drive there if that's necessary for you. And you can go and have an absolutely fantastic time. The other thing I think I've probably mentioned by now, I have solar panels on the Orlando house. They are not turned on yet. I am waiting for the local energy provider, Duke Energy, to show up and put in a new meter, a bi-directional meter, which will allow electricity to come to the house and then from the house via the solar panels to the grid in the occasions that the house produces more electricity than it uses. And most people don't know this, but the absolute best month in most locations is May. And I want this turned on today. I want it turned on yesterday because it's April, and April's really good. May is really good. June's pretty good, and maybe, just maybe, June will be a little bit better than May for some people, depending on the weather patterns. But you would think that June would be the best because that's the solstice. And maybe, again, just maybe, depending on the specifics and the weather, June might be better for you, but for most people, May is better most years because in June, things start to get warm. And unless my solar panels are different or they've changed the way solar panels work, generally speaking, they work best at moderate temperatures. I'm not aware of a downside for the cold, but over 80, over 85, over 90, you start to get a small amount of loss in performance. And that's why later in June when it gets warm, July and August are the hottest. And of course, now the sun is past the solstice and starting to sink, but it's the hottest time of the year. So you have the sinking sun along with the really hot temperatures. And so the production falls off a little bit more than most people expect in the late summer. Anyway, more than enough on that. Hopefully that will be hooked up soon and cranking out powerful electricity. Oh, fun side note. Apparently people like my little updates on the pool and the pool temperature. Specifically, I left the pool uncovered on purpose over the Easter weekend while I was away in Phoenix because I wasn't going to be here. I wasn't going to use it. And I came back and it was 80 degrees. Just for reference, before I left, at least in the afternoon, it was in the low 90s. So it's 80 degrees. This morning it was even cooler at 79 degrees because yesterday it rained and it was cloudy and it was dark. So the solar panels on the roof, this is the one big downside, can't heat up the pool very much when it's not sunny. So I've drug out my little, what do you call it? Heat pump water heater. And I've got that going. I've got the cover back on. And today is supposed to be 100% full sun. I'm optimistic by late afternoon, we could be 84 to 85. And hopefully after a couple of days, we'll be back into the high 80s or low 90s. Just fun little experiments here. Of course, if I had the choice to do it from scratch, I would definitely have a big heat pump, which the downside is you have to continuously pay for the electricity, but then I could, where the water solar panels are, I could put PV, photovoltaic solar panels up and collect more electricity than the heat pump would use, at least on an annual basis. So it still would save me money and it would be pretty darn efficient. And the nice thing about the pool heat pump is that you can control when you want to heat the pool. Day, night, it just won't matter, where now I'm mostly dependent on the sun and locking in that temperature. But anyway, thank you for listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. Like I said, if you like the show, leave a 5-star review somewhere or share with a friend. If you have questions or there's a topic you would like me to go over, send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. If there's someone you'd like me to interview, you can also send me that information. It would be nice, particularly if you knew how to contact this person and or this person was someone who was obtainable. I mean, you could send me a thing saying you want me to interview Hillary Clinton. That's nice. But unless you have a way for me to contact Hillary Clinton, it's probably not going to happen. So just keep that in mind. I'd be happy to have some bigger names in politics, in investments, in atheism, secularism, humanism, skepticism, whatever you'd like. Let me know. I can always look into it. But that's it for today's show. I do hope to see you out there somewhere on the road soon. Until then, ciao.